Dad, this is not the car you ordered.
Take it easy, Rusty. Ed, this is not the car I ordered. I distinctly ordered the Antarctic Blue Super Sports Wagon with the CB and the optional Rally Fun Pack.
You didn't order the metallic P?
Metallic P? No, Antarctic Blue. The sports wagon. This isn't even the right model.
You know, I think you're right. I don't think this is the car. This is the new Wagon Queen family truckster. This is a damn fine automobile, if you want my honest opinion. Beats the hell out of the sports wagon, but I want to make you happy, huh? Davenport, I'll get to the bottom of this.
Yes, Mr. Ed.
Mr. Griswold ordered a blue sports wagon. Where is it?
I don't know, sir.
I know what must have happened. It didn't come in.
Ed, I'm not your ordinary everyday fool, okay? Now, I'd like my Antarctic Blue Super Sports Wagon right now, and if you can't get it for me, I'm going to take my business elsewhere. Where's my old car?
I'm just as upset as you are, believe me. Davenport, get Mr. Griswold's car back and bring it back here. I can get you the wagon. There's no problem there. The problem is it might take 6 weeks. Now, I owe it to myself to tell you, Mr. Griswold, that if you're thinking of taking the tribe cross-country, this is the automobile you should be using, the Wagon Queen family truckster. You think you hate it now, but wait till you drive it.
Clark W. Griswold is not your ordinary everyday fool. He's an exceptional fool and one who loves to travel. Whether it's California's Walley World, Europe, or Las Vegas, Clark has experienced a lot as a customer while traveling with his family. In this scene from 1983's National Lampoon's Vacation, Clark is experiencing what could have been a relationship restoration moment that could have cemented his loyalty for life. Rick Denton can tell you about successes in a moment like this, as well as disasters. Spoiler alert, it's a disaster for Clark. Rick, probably just like the traveling Clark Griswold, believes the best meals are served outside and require a passport. On this week's episode, Rick and I discuss how a total voice of the customer approach leads to growth, his 3 pillars of total voice of the customer, how voice of the customer impacts both internal and external processes, how to gain insights from employees, how process fits into delivering your brand promise, how stories about your customers can change your employee perceptions, how he experienced the Japanese culture of omotenashi, and how relationship restoration can drive customer loyalty. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at ajppitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Thanks everyone for joining another episode of Next in Queue. Today, we're going on a little adventure because I have the host of CX Passport on the show, Rick Denton. Rick, how are you?
I am doing well, Rob. I'm looking forward to this. It's not often that I get to be on this side. So I don't know what's going to happen today, which I think is going to be a lot of fun.
I know that feeling. It's a fun feeling. And I'm excited just to be able to listen to the dulcet tones of your voice for the rest of this episode. So thank you for joining. By the way, I wore my brand new kind of Hawaiian KU shirt just for you. I figured, right, being the CX passport travel theme guy that I would
And
wear.
see, I thought you were just rubbing me because I'm a Duke grad and a Duke fan. So I didn't know if we were going to get into a basketball conversation today. But yes, I do appreciate the Hawaiian themed. And it makes me want to be not where I am, but rather out in Hawaii, indeed.
Me too. Me too. I would much prefer to be in Hawaii. You and I are both in the middle of the country, although you do have the warmer section. You're in Texas. I'm
I
in
am.
Kansas. You know, not as exciting, I don't think.
Now, I will say I haven't spent much time up there, but when I have, I actually had a pleasant experience. So don't sell it short. We both come from lands that are quite flat.
Yes.
Although I actually heard, I don't, has nothing to do with customer experience or the podcast, but I happen to live where the PGA, and not the PGA Live Tour, that's a different PGA, but the PGA of America has moved their headquarters, and they had a tournament there, and it referred to the Hills of Frisco. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know where those hills are, but okay, let's see how this works. So I don't know if they made some hills or what that's going to be, but yes. So maybe we have a little more than Kansas, but don't sell the state short. It's a good place.
We have the Flint Hills, and they are not far away. It's funny. Okay. People think of Kansas as really flat, and don't get me wrong, compared to a lot of places, it is really flat, but there are flatter places. I'm looking at you, Iowa. Oh, yeah, I
didn't know we were going to get into some state battles here. Interesting.
It's not really a battle. I'm just saying
I didn't know that was how you did your podcast. Okay. All right. Let's have some fun.
I do whatever I feel like I want to do. That's how we roll.
Nice.
Rick, I am going to guess that a lot of my listeners are familiar with you and your podcast, but I'm sure there are some who are not. So can first just tell us a little bit about you. How did you get started in this business, and how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I thank you, Rob, for having me on the show. I really do appreciate that. I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. And if you hit stop now, and I don't recommend that you do, but if you do, that's really what you need to know about me, is I believe in the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Married, got 2 kids. Those kids are actually in university now, or will soon be. One is a rising freshman. The other is a rising senior. So my wife and I are looking at each other going, all right, where do we get to travel next now that we don't have anybody in the house? They're not out yet. It is summer as we're recording this. How did I get into this business? So currently I have an independent consulting company that's focused on customer experience, EX for CX, execution for customer experience. Been at it just shy, I'm looking at the calendar, just shy of 6 years now. And it has been a really fun ride. How did I get there? So my career before that was focused in areas like process improvement, project management. Heck, my first job coming out of school was they taught this poli-sci major how to code at Anderson Consulting. And yes, it was Anderson Consulting then, not which is now Accenture today. So even some coding in my background. But what I came to realize along the way, and it evolved into customer experience, but I realized some of that business process work that I was doing, that process improvement, all of that, well, we were improving for the company, although actually we were improving for the customer. And looking back, I think I've been doing customer experience a lot longer than I realized that I've been doing it as a formal title. It does change the lens, of course, right? You make your decisions based off of an outside-in look versus an inside-out. But some of the things that we were doing in process improvement, making appraisal times faster for Washington Mutual, well, that's great for the business. But guess what? If you're a customer and you're waiting to get the loan or your home equity or your mortgage settled, wouldn't you want that appraisal done faster? So it's just been kind of in the blood. And I don't know, Rob, maybe it's just because I get really pissed off when there's bad customer service out there. So maybe that's how I got into this business. I don't know. With all that travel, there's plenty of opportunities for great CX and really poor CX. So that could be part of it as well. I don't know if that journey made any sense, but that's how I got to where I am today. And it's been a lot of fun.
I love it. What made you start the podcast, and where did the theme, I guess, of the podcast come from?
Yeah. So Man, boy, you're really taking me back into my way back machine here. So the podcast has been going for a little over 2 years now, and it was April of 21. And at that time, it was one of those things that I'd had a lot of LinkedIn connections and relationships with folks across the globe. And I liked talking to them, and I liked having these conversations with them, periodic networking, let's catch up, that sort of thing. And I realized I'd like to continue those conversations and share those. And sort of a, why not? Let's just try this and see what happens type approach. And so I set one goal, and that goal has still remained the top one. It was interesting conversations with interesting people. And so I joked that if the only 2 downloads I got were the guest and me, then I would be satisfied, because I just wanted to have those conversations. So that was the motivation of getting into it. It also was, if you think about that timing, we'd spent a year in pandemic. So there were probably a lot of folks like me. I don't know, maybe I kind of got the idea from others thinking about going into creating a podcast, because what are we going to do with all of this still time that we have? And it's been a lot of fun. Why CX Passport? It's simply because kind of my tagline, I believe the best meals are served outside and require passport. I had that before I had CX Passport. I just love to travel. I'm not kidding when I'd say you just as likely find me here in Texas as you would my wife and I in Thailand, right? We love seeing the globe. Our kids love seeing the globe. And that just sort of combined the 2 loves of customer experience and travel into, well, a URL that was available, CX Passport.
Well, it is a great show, and it's very interesting, and I love that combination. And I do think that when you can take your passion and infuse it into something that is, business focused, it really helps make it more interesting, so that it's not just, dull people talking about CX. It's interesting people talking about CX and other stuff. And I love that.
That's right. And that's why I got to have guests, because of that phrase, interesting people, right? So I got to have someone else on the other line to hold up that interesting bar and keep that going.
You and I are going to have to stop being self-deprecating when we're around each other, because I think both of us use that. And I don't know that people will be able to stand us both doing that all the time.
All right. Duly noted. I will carry forward.
Okay, good. Let's talk about voice of the customer. Voice of the customer is it's a term that is thrown around a lot. There are whole companies built on voice of the customer, huge companies. But I take it that you have a little bit different thought process on voice of the customer. So when I just say that term, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Well, the first thing that pops into my head is that cheeky little tagline that I offer, and that is stop, survey, and score, start, listen, and act. And the reason I say that is because so many people, so many companies, so many teams associate voice of the customer with the word survey. And I've asked that question a lot on my show. We've had conversations about that. It is, people think that a survey program is a total voice of the customer approach, and it's not. I'm not anti-survey. I'll start right there and want to make sure that that's heard. Surveys have their place, but they are just one portion of an overall voice of the customer approach that, when done right, actually is how you create tangible business value, tangible business results. I sincerely believe that voice of the customer is the foundation for a company unlocking business growth. And I mean that even now, even when we're talking recession, even when we're worried about rate increases. So even when all of that is going on, a voice of the customer, a total voice of the customer approach is how a company can truly unlock those business results.
So you say total voice of the customer. So aside from surveys, what's missing if you want to get total voice of the customer?
Yeah. So it's in that survey, stop, survey, and score, start, listen, and act approach. So I think of total voice of the customer as listen and act. There's actually a third one, and engage. It just doesn't sound as good off the tongue to, to say start, listen, and act. But I'll talk about all three. Listen is that idea of, okay, how do I hear what my customer's saying, where they're saying it, when they're saying it, even when they're not saying it? So what are your listening posts? Am I using surveys? Am I using social media? Am I observing behavior? What is my sales data? What are all the ways that a customer communicates with me, the company, so that then I am intaking all of that and listening to them? Then I'm analyzing that, right? It's one thing to listen to it, but companies can often fall in the trap of reacting to the most frequent or the loudest. And that's not the same as the most impactful. So that point of listen is really across that collect and analyze. Act is, okay, do something about this silly thing that you found out. You know what your customer's saying. You know what they want, they desire. You know how that ties to business results. Well, then do something about it, and do that across two ways. One is what I call internal, and I know people have different definitions of it, but to me, it's internal closed loop feedback. And that is, how do I improve my company? I've heard these themes. Well, how about I stop doing those themes that are creating bad customer experience so that more customers will come back? How about I do something about that? Well, there's a process there. It doesn't just happen automatically. It may one off, but can I do this as a process of ingesting that customer insight and then doing something with it? That's the internal. The external is that idea of restoring relationships. And that Be Our Guest book, that back there by Disney, is the influencer for me. And that is that idea of don't fix issues, but restore relationships, and be able to have a defined process where you are taking a customer, an individual customer concern, and then restoring the relationship associated with that customer concern. That'd be listen and act. If we stopped here, that's where, to me, that is a total voice of the customer approach. But there's a bonus item, and engage. What are you doing with your employees with this? How do you create employee engagement from voice of the customer? How do you inspire? How do you coach? How do you celebrate? All of those things go into a total voice of the customer approach. So that's a lot there. Certainly there's, I've got materials that people can look at and that kind of stuff, but the total voice of the customer approach goes so much further than just a simple survey. It's really how you go about creating tangible business results.
Rick, I thought that employee engagement was about games and, periodic rewards and those kinds of things. And what I hear you saying is that maybe there's something more to it. Is that the case?
There is. Now, again, just like I'm not anti-survey, I'm not anti-game. Now, I have found myself, as I've crossed over several age thresholds, that not as interested in the happy hours and some of that kind of stuff. So that part of it, I can do without that part. But there's so much, clearly there's more to employee engagement than just using voice of the customer. But if you're not using voice of the customer, you are missing out on an incredibly impactful tool that you can use to create great employee engagement.
Yeah. Our employees are, in fact, the people that are going to execute a lot of these things. I mean, obviously, there are certain things that have to happen at a different level, process things that may require, a different department to get involved. We might have to get IT involved, or we've got to get procurement involved, or, right, all these, depending on the scale of your company. But ultimately, a lot of the interaction that companies have with customers happen with those frontline employees, which are the bulk of your employees, right? I mean, most companies have kind of that pyramid shape, and it's all these people at the bottom that are actually touching your employees, not physically, but
Well, they can, right? Massage envy,
possibly,
right?
Yeah.
There's actually frontline employees that there's touching, so that's okay. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Rob.
Okay. If you're not in that type of business, probably best not to be touching your customers. But sure, there are exceptions to that. So what are some ways that you can go about not only engaging those employees, but getting some of those insights from the employees that are part of voice of the customer?
I use the phrase that your frontline employees are actually the co-creators of customer experience with your customer, right? They aren't just they are co-creating because it happens. That's that magic point, that touch that you're describing. I'll describe one option and sort of with a storytelling. So I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there are two major airlines headquartered here. And I have experienced both of those airlines just in the nature of business. And as happens with any company, travel, things go off the rails. So this isn't blaming airline or anything like that, because operational stuff does happen. So I call and I have something that I need taken care of. And being the good little CX guy that I am, at the end of that, I say to the agent of airline, I won't use colors, I'll just say airline Q, right? I don't think we have a Q here. Airline Q. Hey, do you have a place to capture this? How do you handle my feedback? Where does that go? That sort of stuff. And, airline Q agent said, we don't have anything for that. And the agent wasn't rude. They just said, we don't have anything for that. Here's an email address that you can email customer support, yada, 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 that sort of stuff. Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, I have another experience with airline R. Again, no tie to any actual name. And same kind of thing. I asked the questions like, oh yeah, absolutely. Let me, and you could actually hear the keys kind of clickety clackety as there. And I said, oh, cool. What do you do? Oh, well, we insert it and it goes into this thing. And then there's a team that looks at it. I'm like, oh, well, do you find out what happened? Oh, absolutely. We find out later if the input and we see what, I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. I love airline R. Yes, I called them airline R. And so that's an example of going back to process and why so much of customer experience actually is process. And that is, it's one thing to say to your frontline, we care about you. We want you to really do great by the customer experience and give us information. Well, have you given them a system, whether that's technology or a tablet and a number 2 pencil, a system by which you can actually take those insights from the front line? So that'd be the first thing that I offer. The second thing is, are you giving it back to them? Remember my story with R, not only did they have a method to provide it, but that agent said, oh no, I know exactly what happens. And here's what happens. We had this solution, that sort of thing. And so that two-way circular process not only helps create that source, that ability to mine the gold that comes out of customer contact. And it doesn't have to be on the phone. It can be your retail store. It can be whatever it is that is the front line for your business. Then in making sure that you're including that front line, both in at least the results, but why not even bring the front line into co-design, have design the solutions together so that you aren't off in some boardroom designing something, but rather collaborating with the people who will actually be expected to deliver that great customer experience idea that you came up with.
Yeah, I think depending on who you are as a business, right? Process can feel restrictive. Yet at the same time, when you get this great balance of process along with some individualism, you get the magic that you mentioned, where we can ensure that we're delivering things consistently at a high level, but you get a nice personal touch that goes along with that because we hire people, hopefully. I mean, not everywhere. There are airline that everybody has heard of might not be even using people anymore in their customer service department. Certainly not ones talking on the phone, but
right,
the people make a huge difference as well.
I don't want to certainly, yes. Sorry, there was about 7 thoughts that hit my head at the same time. Let me try to parse them. And sorry, you get me talking about customer experience and the heart rate goes up and I get all excited. So let me just kind of calm for a second. The people part of it is so absolutely vital. And to your point of letting process be an enabler, not a constrainer, and using process so that you can create great experiences for every customer every time. And even let's take the word great out of this for a second. Just deliver your brand promise experience for every customer every time. I love surprise and delight. It's got a place. Boy, I'm really going tangents here. I love surprise and delight. It belongs. But too often we think that that's what needs to be for every customer, whereas I think most of us as customers, especially now, would be like, can you just deliver what you say you're going to deliver at the time you're going to deliver it and the way you're going to deliver it? I'm good. I don't need your card. Just I don't need your overly friendly empathy. Can you just solve this need? And so, yeah, the humans absolutely to be enabled by process. I've got a guest that's coming on, and her episode will come out in a few weeks, Kendall Berg. And she was a part of a great solution that we did at Capital One where we optimized the systems for the agents. They had to go across 12, 15 screens to solve a particular customer need, and it was resolved down to one. Well, that's a system. That's a process that was then improved for an agent so that they in turn could actually focus on being human with the customer, actually be empathetic to that customer's concern, really understand it rather than, and you hear the clacking while they're going through 12 screens. So process isn't bad as long as it's an enabler, not a constrainer.
Yeah. You brought up something I 100% agree with, and that is the wow or the surprise and delight. Like that's all fine and dandy, and it really is great if you do it really well as an organization. But you gotta crawl before you walk or run, right? Just get the basics right.
Yes. Yes. And there's a way to even do that with process. Chewy is now getting the rounds on LinkedIn, and I don't think it's anything new, but pets are family to people. And I don't want to hear otherwise. Pets are family to people. Yeah. And when that pet passes, that's an incredible, grievous moment for someone. And so the story of the recurring shipment, someone calls in to say, hey, I no longer need the food. And Chewy's response back to that customer, well, that's not one off. There's a process behind that. And so there can even be those moments of surprise and delight for every customer every time if they're enabled by process and if they're authentically behind it, right? If it just feels like a cold response. And so process isn't bad there. Process enables Chewy to be able to deliver that incredibly touching, I'm getting choked up, touching moment for a pet owner that has lost their family member.
Yeah. And I think also, right, getting the right people. I mean,
let's go back to people. You're right. Let's talk about
that. Chewy really focuses on getting people that care about animals, that care about pets. If I had to guess, I would say their agents are probably 95% pet owners themselves, right? And so it makes it really easy. Now, not every company can do that, right? Because your product may not have the same kind of mass appeal that Chewy does, right? They're providing products for pets, and lots of people have pets. That's not an uncommon thing. But if you get people that genuinely have that love for their dog or their cat or their fish or their bird or their snake or, whatever they have, their goats in the backyard or their chickens, when they encounter someone else, it's like almost like instant rapport as well, because now I'm learning about your pet, and I can share with you that, my pet is, my lab, or, my kitten that I just got, or whatever the case may be. It's like a great business to be in, to have that model. But no matter the business, if you get the right people that care about what it is that you do, your product or your service, it just makes all the difference when you pair that with great processes.
When you're talking about great people, there's two things that I think really come to mind there. And one is this idea of hire happy people in a role like it was Pret a Manger, I think it was. And this is maybe we're getting in the decade or maybe 2 decades ago, but Pret a Manger's chief happiness officer, which was, I believe, the chief people officer, had talked about that concept of we can teach people to make sandwiches. We hire happy people and teach them to make sandwiches. And that concept of hire happy people applies. Now, if you are the engineer designing the wing for my Boeing 787, I don't care if you're happy or not. So there are industries where skills matter, right? I don't want to just be glib here as CX people. Oh, we just hire happy people. We'll teach them to do things. No. It's okay. Go get your doctorate in engineering and design my wing perfectly. But for those areas where it obviously makes sense, where it's human and that sort of stuff. So the hire happy people and pivoting your hiring approach is a choice. We did that actually at Capital One, where we were focused on changing the hiring for our home equity folks, that we really focused more on I don't want to say moron. I don't want to get into trouble here, but there was a lot of emphasis on their human skills, their people skills. They didn't have to have financial services background. One of our best hires was a service advisor from Firestone Auto Repair because they demonstrated such phenomenal humanity there. Someone said, hey, have you thought about? And so that recruiting took place there. So there's the hire happy people part. The other part is I mentioned home equity. To your point, it's not that they could hire just people that had home equity. Chewy, pet people, easier to hire for. Home equity is not an overly common product. And so what you can do in that situation is bring the customer story into the company and build that connection and humanity with your employees by bringing the customer story in. You wouldn't expect me to be crying at a town hall for home equity, but I would be crying when some of these stories would come in, when you'd hear that a family could adopt a 14-year-old girl because of the home equity product, a family that was able to afford life-saving cancer treatment because of a home equity product. You start telling those stories, and suddenly you start building that connectivity, the customer. And so in an industry where maybe not everyone can have the product or experience the product, how do you bring those customer stories in? Goes back to a voice of the customer approach.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is another thing that companies can do a better job of. And that is really talking about the things that they enable.
Yeah.
What does our product or service enable? That helps the people, the frontline employees, the agents, or whoever they are, whatever their role is, to really understand more about the customer before they've even had a chance to meet them and start asking those probing questions. If you have a general idea of, what are some of the things that we help people do?
Yeah. Yeah. It changed the perspective. We went through a real kind of customer experience culture shift. And one of the ways that we knew that we had arrived, and no one actually ever arrives, but where we knew we were getting the traction we wanted, is historically people had referred to, hey, I had to work 10 files today. And I'm not exaggerating when I say the language shifted and people said, I helped 4 families today. Yeah. And just the change from files to families showed that there was that realization that I'm not offering a $20,000 home equity loan. I'm offering a tool that unlocks whatever that person is trying to unlock with those dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's switch gears. Because you're the CX Passport guy, I want to talk about your best customer experience while traveling. What was it and what made it great?
Wow.
Yeah, you didn't know this one was coming. I just threw this one at you, and I'm going to see how well you hit this pitch.
It's not, the struggle that I'm having right now is not actually coming up with a story. It's coming up with which story to tell. I'm going to tell one that isn't okay. So I could tell you about the incredible luxury experiences that we experienced in Thailand, and the care and concern and the incredible personalization that we experienced in some. Thailand really has a very strong service culture. But there's one that's more recently coming to mind, and it's not as over the top as some of those things. It's actually a little more personal. And I came later to understand a word behind this. And I'll say at the beginning, I'll say at the end, it's a omotenashi. It's a Japanese word, omotenashi, that has to do with just the desire to deliver hospitality and the desire to ensure that the guest is cared for and taken care of, and that the guest's requests are handled. And we were staying in Kyoto. My son studied abroad in spring. And so as a family, we went over and went to Japan, to Tokyo and then Kyoto. And we were staying at and I'm going to name it, the Hilton Garden Inn there in Kyoto. And we were there around New Year's Eve. And New Year's is celebrated a little differently, certainly in Kyoto, that it's more of an internal sort of quiet, introspective family time. And then at midnight, folks go to the temple and worship for New Year's Day. And so restaurants and those kind of things aren't as widely available. And so we were unable to plan out any sort of dinner or anything like that. And so I asked the person at the front, hey, is there anything you can do? I know, and I understand. And the depth to which this person explored who I am, what my family is, what I wanted out of this in the morning. And then when I came back at night, to hear how this person had gone out of their way to explore all these, I called this place, but they were closed today. I called this, all of the effort that was put into this showed me that it was this omotenashi, this just absolute deep care for me and my family, that I was taken care of, and that this was her mission to ensure that we had the experience that she wanted to deliver. And by the way, Japan is not a tipping culture. This is not the kind of thing I could say, oh my gosh, thank you, and slip her, a certain set of yen or anything like that. She would have rejected it outright. In fact, she would have been offended by it, because it would have been, wait, you think I need money to deliver this? And so to be in a non-tipping culture, to experience that kind of hospitality really caught me off guard. And now as I'm telling the story, I got 7 others. But that one really in the recent past showed me what a spirit of human hospitality can be.
I think the hospitality industry is, in general, better at that than some other industries. And I think the best customer experience people that I've had an opportunity to interact with have been at one point or another involved in some way in the hospitality industry, whether it's restaurant or hotel or travel, whatever the case may be. But that definitely is above and beyond. And I love that they took the time not just to, say, well, I'll see what we can do, but ask more probing questions, learn more about you, because this is a lesson that I've tried to teach people in the hotel reservations space for a long time. Really getting a good understanding of what someone is doing, why they're traveling, have they ever been there before, all of those kinds of things really helps you personalize and paint a picture and make a great recommendation for them in kind of a sales situation, so that you can really help them understand what it is they're getting. And that's really important if they haven't gotten it yet and they really don't know until they get there. So you have to be vivid about what you're doing, and you have to make it personal if you want to be really successful.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of that.
And that I didn't even mention that, some of the places she was like, well, they didn't pick up the phone. So I walked over to them and knocked on the door and to see if they're like, she actually went that far. I forgot that part of the story. Like, it was just so amazing. Another category, and I've got other stories, I won't tell them, but another category where you really start to see whether a brand cares about customer experience is in that relationship restoration space. When something goes wrong, how they handle it has been particularly insightful. And there's a key Disney story that's part of my Disney experience that they nailed it on the relationship restoration. So that's a whole nother category of what a great experience can be. And getting that right, truly, companies that get that, no, don't anybody hear me and say, try to piss off your customers so you can restore their relationships. I think the Apostle Paul talked about, so if I have grace, should I sin more? No, I'm not suggesting that. But the idea is, when it does happen, it is an amazing loyalty cementer in people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's okay to recognize that you won't be perfect. Like, every business is on this journey of improvement, and things will go wrong. Just like you talked about with the airlines, right? Things are going to go wrong from time to time. That's life. That's part of humans being in the mix. It's what you do in that moment that can really send people in completely opposite directions.
Oh my gosh, I could spend another hour. Like, you've already, like, this conversation here, just talking about it, has unfortunately triggered all the ones that have pissed me off too. So we're not going to talk about those, but some of those are really coming to mind as well. Oh gosh. When you do it wrong, you can really lose a customer for life.
What I love is the visceral reaction that you just had thinking about those moments that went wrong. right? And that's how we are as humans, right? We have that emotion tied to it. And so there is this visceral reaction when we think about something that is wonderful and was great. And we're just like, you kind of get that, and then when something is the opposite, like you can see it in the face and it gnaws at you and you're crazy about it. Like, "Arr."
It is why I think that I've got pretty darn good job security for a while. The only challenge is a lot of those companies that have pissed me off have no interest in getting better, but there's plenty of opportunity for improvement for companies that do want to improve. And it is fertile ground for customer experience consultants like me.
It is. It absolutely is. Speaking of, if someone wanted to get in touch with Rick, whether or not they have a passport or they like to eat outside, what's the best way for them to do it?
So to get in touch with me individually, certainly LinkedIn. All right, hit me up, Rick Denton, there on LinkedIn. There may be a couple others, but I don't think there's a ton of us out there. So Rick Denton, if you need to filter, I'm there in the Dallas, Texas area.
Check the show notes.
Oh, yeah, of course. Show notes. Silly me. And then the website is ex4cx.com. And if you want to hit the podcast, that is cxpassport.com, or there's a YouTube channel as well under the same name. If you want to know more about my total voice of the customer approach, that sits at totalvoc.com. All of that's, though, there at the ex4cx.com website.
The other thing that you do that I should just point out, because I really enjoy it, is you make some great shorts. So I encourage everyone to go to YouTube. Check out Rick's channel. We'll put a link to that too. Not just the podcast, but you've got some really creative and informative shorts, right? They're not all super funny, but they are worth your time. And I think my favorite that I'll just throw out here, if you haven't seen it, folks, seriously, go check it out. You have a short, I guess it's a series, but the one that I saw is if airline commercials were like pharmaceutical commercials, and it is a riot. It had me laughing out loud. So go check it out.
Thanks, Rob, for pointing that one out. That was a lot of fun to put together. It was a lot of work to put together, which is why the series is like road construction in Texas. It's always ongoing. And so, yes, I expect to see car dealerships on there someday. I expect to see what if pharma did commercials for a gym membership. All of those things are true. But right now, you're right. The airline is the only one. And it was a lot of fun to put together. Easy target.
It was an easy target, but you nailed it. And
thank you.
Should check it out. Well, Rick, thanks for being on Next in Queue. This was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you coming around with your dulcet tones so that we could have this conversation.
Rob, thank you so much. It was an honor to be on your show, and I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please, by all means, subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.